Alright, one thing I failed to mention earlier is you don't want to have squared off shoulders right here on your tang, between the tang and the shoulders on your blade. Squared off shoulders are weak points. Makes it more likely that somebody using your blade hard might snap your tang off. You don't want that. So leave a little bit of a radius, little radial, little half moon shape there, just kind of round off the corners there on your shoulders. You don't want them squared off. Once I've done that, now I'm ready to start working on my guard. So for this one, I'm going to use nickel silver. I got this bar from Gents Supply, knifemaking.com. They're one of the suppliers I use quite a bit. Good materials, good customer service. So anyway, all right, so when I'm ready to make my guard, this is how I do it. Once again, not the only way to do it, just the way I prefer to do it. Let me go ahead and take my blade out of my file guard. All right, now this is how I like to do it. I lay my blade down kind of flat where I want, and I figure out kind of how far I want it to stick out in front of my blade. If I want any extra out here behind the back side of my blade, figure out where I want it at, and then figure out about where I want my slot to be. Once I do that, I'll just take a little Sharpie, and I'll just mark that corner there, mark that corner there. That gives me an idea. So from about right here to right there where my shoulders are going to be. And then I normally will just kind of color that in, mark that off. That's about how wide my slot needs to be. Next, I'll just drill holes, a series of holes along this little line here. Show you that in a second. All right, I failed to mention, normally before I try to drill a series of holes, a lot of times it's hard to get your holes perfectly lined up, especially if your tang isn't just super wide. You start drilling holes and they start wandering one side or the other, then you're going to end up with a hole that's not suitable for your tangs, too wide for your tangs. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just take my Dremel with a cutting bit or cutting disc, and I'll cut a little groove, just to start a little groove there. Makes it easier for my drill bit to have a place to go that I know is going to be perfectly in line where I need it to be. So I'm going to drill my holes now. All right, now I'm going to drill me some holes. Put your safety goggles on. Don't want slivers of metal flying in your eyes. Sometimes you may have to clean some shavings off. holes real close to each other, but I'll come back and work on it some more with my Dremel in a second. Now the next thing I normally do is I will take a step bit and I will drill out the underside of what will be my guard. That gives a place for the solder to go to when I solder my guard in. Now, you can see I've kind of hollowed out a place for when I put my guard in. This will be the top side, this will be the bottom side. There'll be a place around the guard, or actually on the underneath side of the guard, around the tang for the solder to puddle. Allows you to put a lot of solder in there to really solder the guard in good, or solder the blade in the guard good. Alright, now that I've got that done, the bottom side hollowed out for a place for my solder to go. I've got my series of holes drilled. Now I'm going to go back to my Dremel and finish working on cutting my slot. Once I've got my slot cut all the way through, enough to where I can get a file in there, I'll start filing it down even, filing it down smooth. Then I'll start trying to put my tang in here, rinse and repeat until I get my slot cut and filed out like I want it, big enough for my tang to fit. I'll show you some more of that here in a second.